Distinguished Senator Prince Bassey Otu, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. My very distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Prince Bassey Otu, representing Cross River South Senatorial District. Mr. President, a motion on urgent need to improve internally generated revenue of the federal government through the implementation of back duty investigation. As a committee, it's become very clear to us that in order for us to achieve the level of implementation of the budget 2012 and to at least guarantee sustainability of our GDP growth rate and to allow government to be able to provide the amenities that's required to, the only way out is to expand our revenue base. The Senate notes that the Federal Inland Revenue Service has in recent times increased its efforts at investigating tax cases to nip tax dodgers or tax evaders, though the coverage is still insignificant to the population of all taxable Nigerians. Aware that back duty investigation is an anti-tax evasion tool applied by the tax authority in Nigeria to recover unpaid taxes when there has been omission or error in the assessment or collection of taxes, or where there has been falsification or doubtful claims or allowances to relief, and a failure to disclose or include in full any income or earnings in tax returns made to the tax authority. The Senate observed that recent preliminary findings have revealed various discrepancies and manipulations undertaken by some companies, largely in almost all the sectors of the economy, in the payment and remission of taxes to the tax authorities. Worried that corporate companies operating in Nigeria have undeclared income in terms of company income tax, withholding taxes and VAT, which forms the major bulk of tax revenue to the government, and have failed in their statutory responsibilities of full or significant compliance with relevant revenue laws of the federal government of Nigeria. Further worried that over 50% of collectible revenue are lost yearly, amounting to billions of naira, and have robbed the country of the required resources commensurate with its responsibilities to provide infrastructure like roads, hospitals, schools, etc. He informed that some state governments and some federal ministries, departments and agencies have failed in their statutory obligations to remit withholding taxes and VAT deducted on contracts to the Federal Inland Revenue Service. This has led to a heavy loss in the internally generated revenue of the federal government of Nigeria. Disturbed on the various complaints on some companies' refusal to operate according to Nigerian laws on taxation, and even international best practices, especially in the oil industry and financial sectors, and cognizant of the need for back duty investigation in order to recover unpaid taxes and devise ways of catching tax dodgers or tax evaders in the last 6 years, with a view to increasing tax revenue generation for the federal government. The Senate accordingly resolves to mandate the Senate Committee on Finance to investigate all issues relating to unpaid taxes, tax evaders, and recommend appropriate modalities to be adopted to effectively block the loopholes created in the system, and submit its finding to the Senate. I so move. My distinguished colleagues, my name is Bassey Otu, representing the good people of the Cross River South Senatorial District. Let me immediately commend the Senate Committee on Finance, National Planning, for doing a very, very good job. It is very true that this particular presentation of the MTEF is a little bit better than what was presented the last time. The macroeconomic assumptions, of course, which the budget already read will be founded, are all raised here on some of the issues that the chairman has enumerated. The first one being the benchmark price of crude per barrel. I believe the 77 that we've agreed in the Senate is good enough, considering the slower growth rate forecasts of most world economies and even the OECD countries. But the average exchange rate of 160, it's a bit difficult. I think the committee will have to look into that very seriously, because already the inflationary pressures and other pressures on the currency are such that our foreign reserve can almost totally be depleted if we don't allow it to actually take its real rate. The gross federally collectible revenue of the federal government, I do have some problems with that, because the internally generated funds have not been captured anywhere. As a matter of fact, even in the budget pronunciation itself, the internally generated revenue from the MJs and the tertiary institutions have not been captured. And this is a major source of leakage which has to be plugged as urgently as possible. The current spending is still high, but we also have to consider the absorptive capacity of the economy in terms of raising the capital spending. I think it's been done by about 2.something%, which is very marginal, but it's a step in the right direction. The area which this Senate will have to bother a lot is that of domestic debts. I believe in the main budget read, 100 billion has been put in place as a sinking fund to pay for maturing domestic debt obligations. But I believe that the contractors' debts, the contingent liabilities, and even our future obligations, pension obligations, are not captured there, because if the numbers are there, the debt sustainable indicators which we have now will be spurious. And then the increase in terms of the oil output to 2.53 is something that we have to worry a lot, because given the unabated increase in crude oil type and the lack of new investments into the sector, and the fact that we've not yet passed the petroleum industry bill, it is difficult for us to know where we're going to show the output which will allow the budget to run very easily. I also support the movement of the accounts, the CISS accounts, to the customs for easy management, of that account. And the MTF will have to come up with some few areas of diversification, because the overly dependent on oil is a little bit of a problem. I believe if we can do that, we'll have a very solid MTF in place that will support our budget. Mr. President, I rest my case. Representing the good people of Cross River State, South Senatorial District, including the abandoned people of Bakassi. Let me quickly join my other colleagues who have commended Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief for his budget presentation. The overall target of fiscal consolidation with inclusive growth holds a lot of potentials for boosting domestic production and conserving our foreign exchange, and also for job creation. Some of the parameters that are putting the budget together, I think a lot has been enumerated here, are things that we will look at very closely. The 5% increase in aggregate expenditure is modest and quite good for the economy. The increase in the capital expenditure, though marginal, of 2.something%. And then the reduction in the projected deficit to 2.17 are all steps in the right direction. The provision of 100 billion Naira sinking fund is also very good. The very first major bold attempt that has been made into looking to our domestic debt profile. The few downsides of the budget are overly dependent on the output and the price of crude. Should there be any, in the event of any major shock, then there's a problem with the revenue component of the budget. The particular indices which we have to look at very seriously is the 2.53 barrels per day. I believe that we'll look at this very well and make sure that we do what is proper. I joined Senator Tai Doko on the imposition of 100% levy on rice. Rice is an important staple food in Nigeria, and I believe that that levy is a little bit premature, given that Nigeria is yet to attain self-sufficiency in rice production. And if the policy comments of the Ministry of Agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture is really something to go by, we'll begin to enjoy the yields, the gains from the Gromo Rice Initiative put in place by 2014 and 15. So you agree with me that the domestic capacity to grow and process rice must be put in place before such policies are effective. I don't even want to talk about the flood, the recent flood that has taken over everywhere. We have to put that into consideration. The proposed issuance of the $100 billion Eurobond for power sector, this has serious implication of increasing debt profile. It should only be welcome if it is intended to be self-liquidating. Sometime in the year 2010, $500 million was borrowed, and up till now, I don't think we really know exactly where it was used. I will also talk on the revenue component of the budget. I will want to support some of our colleagues here that have said that we are not doing enough, because like I said, the internal generated revenue is nowhere to be found. It's a very serious issue. And then I am one of those that believe that this budget can be fully funded without deficit. And I believe that if we come together and look at so many things, this budget can be a budget of surplus. And then the parliament holds the key. We must make sure that we oversight and take care of every milestone achieved in this budget. Because it's only in doing that that we'll make sure that the budget achieves its purpose. Thank you, Mr. President. I rest my case.
Distinguished Senator Prince Bassey Otu.
Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, my name is Senator Prince Bassey Otu, representing Cross River South Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me start by commending the mover of this motion. In the same vein, let me place it on record the gratitude of the people of Bakassi to not just the Senate, but the House of Representatives. The whole Parliament has been with the people of Bakassi since the beginning of this struggle. A nation that cannot take care or protect the life and property of its citizenry is not really what is sought. It is very clear that great injustice has been done to the people of Bakassi. That judgment by the International Court, the ICJ, has been a negation of human existence itself. Even though part of the international community commended Nigeria for the statement-like sobriety, the rest of the world saw it as weakness on the part of Nigeria to defend that which is its own. I want to put it on record that we owe a responsibility as a generation, that if you cannot take care of what your fathers left for you, if you cannot add value to it, at best you should be able to protect it and leave it same to your children. The 1884 treaty which this court based its judgment was very, very clear. It is a Nigerian territory, and like the leader already mentioned, they talk about civilization. That king who signed that treaty was so confident, so wealthy and so big that he proposed to marry even Queen Victoria at some point in time. So it's a bit sad when you turn around and then see them begin to claim issues for which they're doing. The Green Treaty has never, I don't think I've ever seen any treaty like that anywhere in the world. And of course the judgment of that court has never been respected anywhere, and Nigeria had no business in respecting that judgment. We have appealed severally to the federal government to take this case up because, like Senator Italian has stated and the rest, Article 62 has stated clearly that on the basis of new facts, you can call for a review. We have 10 new facts in this document, which we've confronted the federal government severally, and they're still dragging on this particular issue. We are saying it is not late. We have all the facts. The land is that of Nigeria. We cannot be that complacent. We cannot be that docile to watch. And I say it is Bakassi today. It might be any other local government, any other state tomorrow. It is an unfortunate incident that the paramount ruler of Bakassi was assaulted the other day. Somewhere along Aba, he was stopped. And when the police asked him, he said he's the paramount ruler of Bakassi. They said, oh, Bakassi is in Cameroon. Arrested him. It took a lot of telephone calls. It took some hours before a whole paramount ruler who left his palace without picking his walking stick, because before then it was agreed that, look, nothing would be ceded to the Cameroons. And this decision about ceding was just 24 hours to time, so that even some of those who were members of the mixed coalition were surprised, because the initial order they got from the federal government was that Nigeria is not ceding a single part of its territory. I do not want to recall so many things so that I don't speak emotionally. But I quite remember the day the Nigerian flag was drawn down there, that many military personnel nearly collapsed. They couldn't believe that we have blood of Nigerians, blood of Nigerian soldiers that were still right there protecting that territory. And we are walking away from a serious economic asset of that nature without any negotiation. Even the Green Treaty was there for negotiation, but why Nigeria just signed it without negotiation? And you take a people out of their real territory, debase them, you dislocate them without a plebiscite or anything, whether they would like to move or they would not like to move, and then move them like refugees into some other place. Up till today, no protection. Like the Senate leader has stated, it was Cross River has at no time accepted that Bakassi should be ceded, because they are ethnic people, fully, in everything, everywhere from them. The origins of the Great Epe, which we even have in Scotland and Canada, Brazil, and beyond, started right in Bakassi. So I believe that this parliament, we should still leave up to our billing and try to protect the people of Cross River from what Nigeria is doing now. Cross River was not a part, at no time, no point in time, the Cross River support that Bakassi should be ceded. So why must Cross River now come to suffer? Apart from the fact that we are bearing the burden of refugees, the dislocation, the social problems that have come with it. In addition to that, we are being treated like we are not Nigerians. Well, I've been in several forums. My people have said, well, if Nigerians don't want us, we have the right to self-determination. But I believe we will not go to Cameroon, but Bakassi can be a republic, which JFIX can join. So we want to make it very, very clear that it is not too late for Nigeria to quickly appeal that case. It is better to appeal and lose than not to. We have fresh facts to bring that case to the fore, and we are dead ready for it. So I urge all my colleagues to support this motion wholeheartedly, and I rest my case.
Bassey.
Mr. President, Cross River South Senatorial District. Mr. President, there's a small misrepresentation on this issue. This money is actually appropriated by us and is taken from the expenditure framework that comes to this parliament every year. If you look at all the frameworks, even though they say deducting our source, they don't. It's at the end of the year they calculate the 7%, which is unappropriated by this parliament in that expenditure framework before they get it. Yes.
Prince Otu. Bassey.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, my name Bassey Otu, representing Cross River South Senatorial District, and of course the people of Bakassi. Mr. President, I thank you very much for recognizing me to speak on this bill, and I speak in total support of this bill because one of the biggest problems that is facing Nigeria today is unemployment. And it is very clear that from this single product, over 10,000 Nigerians can be gainfully employed. If you look at the gap between what we are importing and what is our consumption rate, you will see that we actually are causing this nation some very bad harm in terms of economic progress. It is also very, very bad for a country like ours to allow these people to go away with murder, because these waivers that are given are very terrible. We experienced it in the early days of the LNG, to the extent that at some point it became almost an albatross for the movement of the industry forward. I think we are seeing same here. Our refineries are moribund because the same people who the privatized refineries were sold to are the same people that are importing this raw sugar into Nigeria. And unless this is corrected, then we cannot move forward as far as this very important commodity is concerned. So in order to encourage our local farmers, because what is being preached by the Brewood twins, IMF and World Bank, is that there should be no subsidy to any commodity that you are producing. If there is no subsidy, of course there should be protection. We must be able to protect our local farmers for them to be able to make a living and add some value to the GDP. So, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I believe that if there is a bill that must be amended, it is definitely this one. We must do it very quick, and at the same time make sure the backward integration involves our MDAs that are involved in agriculture, so that immediately the very wide gap that is created between what we need as a country and what we are importing, that gap is immediately closed, so that at least in this sector we can make some progress. I thank you, Mr. President. On this note, I want to urge all my colleagues that it is indeed a well-founded bill. We should put this as quickly as possible so that it can go to third reading. Thank you, Mr. President. I so submit.
Distinguished Senator Edet Bassey Otu.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, My name, Bassey Otu, representing the people of Cross River South Senatorial District, including the people of Bakassi. Mr. President, my colleagues, thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this bill. I believe that if there's any bill that Nigeria really needs at this point in time, it is truly a bill like this. We have a lot, so we have a lot both in terms of the minerals that are lying beneath our earth and a lot which we need investments to, which of course both the government and the private sector, the way it is now, will be unable to provide. I'm just coming back from the Canadian Nigerian Investment Conference, where I was put on the hot seat by investors on issues like this. When we say Nigeria International Finance Center, it's like saying a financial free zone. A financial free zone, just like we have an export free zone, cannot be established by private sector
Alone.
Exactly. The way it has happened in all countries over the world, whether we're talking of Saudi Arabia, whether we're talking of London, whether we're talking of United Arab Emirates, all has been a government establishment. I will agree that yes, there are some issues here because of our laws, which we have to straighten out. Yes, so some of these laws are antiquated, some of the laws are 50 years back, 30 years back. Some we took over from the colonial masters. They themselves have changed it severally, but we've not changed ours. That must not obstruct Nigeria from moving forward. The main issues and questions that were raised in that conference is, how can they guarantee their returns on investment? It is true that right now we are still building our judiciary to the standards it requires. It is true that there are a lot of financial reforms that are on, which of course this is part of the Vision 2021. It was also agreed there that Nigeria is the next big thing to happen. In fact, Africa is the next big thing, and Nigeria as one of the prime targets. So we cannot, because of our laws, fall short of taking that which is rightfully ours. When we look at our population, we look at the amount of resources which God has blessed us with. Even the hydrocarbon, there's not been direct investments there for a long time because of our laws and because of things that are there. So I do not want people to look at this financial center as if it's something that the private sector can do. They cannot do it. There has to be an act of parliament. I feel some of those issues structurally, we should be adjusted. We'll come at the committee level. We'll all sit down at the committee level, sort it out very, very well, because this is what is going to promote Nigeria, what is going to lift Nigeria to the next level. When you look at the growth of the economy and everything, I don't know where you think we are going to have the resources to finance the projects that are coming on stream. I want all of us, when we leave here, to go and look at it, have meetings with our economists, our manufacturers, and so on and so forth. They will tell you that unless we unlock our revenue potential and make Nigeria a hub, it will be very difficult. This center is a center that all the big international banks will come and operate very, very freely. It's just like you're bringing your products to an economic and export-free zone and getting it processed and sorted, and then you take it out. But more so, that will be so close to us that the impact, both the backward linkage, will be so much that the economy will grow at, in fact, it will add about 2% immediately in the first, second year of operation to what is going now. In that particular conference, it was agreed that our mineral sector here requires an immediate injection of between $10 to $20 billion. And of course, we had investors in Canada who are ready to bring it in. But when they look at it, they say in our banks, only 2 have met the Basel I compliance. Only 2. And that 2 actually is totally unable to finance any project in that region or even receive that kind of sum. Because the shareholder companies of these investors are not ready to move their sums into banks that are not Basel III compliant. We are struggling with only 2 complying at the moment. And if we are to wait for the world, we are to wait for others, then nothing will happen in our sector. So I believe that this is the biggest opportunity. Whatever issues we have in terms of governance or running or confronting our laws, when we go to the committee level, we will sit down and sort it out and make sure we come up with a bill that will stand the test of time. Already we have states that are already struggling for the center. Lagos is ready, 2 ministers are ready for the center immediately. So I don't think there's any problem. It's something that will bring massive, massive development to our area. So I really urge my colleagues that please, let's not throw away the baby and the bad water. Let us make sure that we make the very, very best use of this particular opportunity. Thank you, and I rest my case. My name, Basio Otu, representing Cross River South Senatorial District, and of course the people of Bakassi. Mr. President, let me start by commending the mover of this bill. I will say the bill was thoroughly debated yesterday, and I totally align myself with the issues that were raised. And also permit me to remind the Parliament that it is the job of this Parliament and of course the government to make sure that the wealth of the nation is protected. The savings of our people are very, very important. They form a very big and integral part of the wealth of the nation. And it is true that as a nation, we've not been able to establish ourselves in the e-commerce trade. So this attempt is well received and appreciated, as we have to protect the wealth of our people. My only plea, as I adopt the positions on this bill and that of the first speaker, is to appeal to the Senate President that this bill be consolidated at the committee level with an all-encompassing bill which will cover all electronic transactions in our economy. So I believe that at the committee level, this will be able to take care of that, as this particular bill takes care of only the prohibition and punishment for electronic fraud. The electronic transfer itself and all the structures that goes with it will be coming in the all-encompassing bill, which is part of the Financial System Strategy Bill, Vision 2020, that will be coming up next month. I so submit, Mr. President. There is corruption in this, but this is what you can do to eliminate the corruption. And whether we like it or not, it was the Nigerian people that voted Mr. President into office. And what they want him to do is exactly what he will do. But he has shown goodwill in every respect. He has sent us the petroleum industry bill here, which of course will eradicate all those systemic leakages that are in our system. So I believe that we are not being blackmailed to do anything. It's not because of sentiments. It is our job to make sure that the welfare of Nigerians are well taken care of. As a matter of fact, even when we were passing the budget, I had known that the sum that was made was provided, of course, for the subsidy will not be sufficient. So I believe that this is coming at the right time. The prices of crude in the international market fluctuates, so you can't really fix what the subsidy will be. So nobody should think that anything was totally fixated. We work on provisions, and it will continue to be like that until we decide otherwise. So once more, I want to urge my colleagues that we get this to go on second reading very, very quickly to save Nigerians from further suffering. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, that is very true, but an ombudsman is inevitable for our society going forward now. Actually, this bill of 18 billion, I think when it goes to the committee, we are going to streamline it. But it is very, very clear that the problems we have, even the petitions we go through, I have one here. This is Tonimas Nigeria Limited. It says Tonimas account number that excess irregular bank charges on unauthorized debits of 429,193,492 naira. Now, most of our people who have problems, I can list out the problem, arbitrary bank charges. Already when we talk about interest paid on deposit and the interest on loans, the disparity is just too much. We need an independent ombudsman who will investigate this and check and tell us exactly what it is. We have insurance claims that are not paid. People don't know where to go. When you go to the insurance company, they just laugh about. they just laugh about it. The same thing with stockbrokers who receive money but are unable to account for it in terms of the required stock purchases. A customer's account is debited, yet there's that inability for him to withdraw from the ATM, and yet his account is debited, and he has nobody to complain to. So it's just that this 18 billion that is put forward here, yes, we will, because this year, if we read the papers, we will see the governor commending the director in CBN, because already the unit in CBN, the director there recovered 6 billion naira this year for customers. 6 billion naira from all these banks. So
what's the difference between that and what this one seeks to do now?
They will be able to investigate what exactly is the problem. And the banks will open their doors to it, and the same thing with the customer who wants to fulfill his all righteousness or get his right sorted. So both in the BOFIA Act, in the NDIC, there is nothing there to protect. There is nothing there to protect a customer or a user of the financial services. There's nothing. Right now, you can find out when you go out, they have a problem, they don't know where to go to. And of course, the people of Bakassi. Mr. President, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to contribute on this very all-important subject of constitutional review. Let me also start by commending the committee for doing a very, very good job. My comments are going to be very brief because I believe most of the issues have been mentioned and some thoroughly overflow. Let me start with the issue of tenure. The committee have recommended 6 years, some majority have gone for 4. I want to say in Nigeria of today, I don't think the tenure should be very, very important. What concerns me most and what should bother this parliament is how to come out with a law that will produce a visionary leader, a leader that will be able to take Nigeria to the next level. After all, most of the leaders that have done well are leaders that have stayed even longer than 8 years in office. So I will rely on the point that some of the issues are attitudinal and the fact that we have to look inwards to make sure that some of these things are strengthened and not the Constitution. So I will support probably what the majority want on this issue. On the issue of local government autonomy, I believe that local government should be responsibilities of the states. There is no need creating 2 captains in one ship. Because by creating a smaller nation in a state, we are causing problems and confusion. So let us make sure. In fact, we do have a model in Cross River State where both the state government and the local government are working very, very well. The way they've done it is there's a project accounts which money from the local government goes in and money from the state goes in. And from there, they move ahead and carry out the projects. Because experience has shown that when you give this money to the local government authorities, you will definitely have a problem. So I think we should stand for federalism and allow the present system to continue. The president should retain his power also. I believe that the comfort in our present constitution is enough for the parliament to override any decision that we want to do with the required number of days which have been given. The immunity clause, my people supported a lot. The governors, the president, all of them should retain their immunity powers so that they are not sued every day. The abolition of state electoral commissions, that one is very, very compulsory. I will support Senator Goje here. I believe that we should take that out and allow INEC to conduct all elections. I want to wholeheartedly support the view of Senator Ashafa that Lagos, in fact not just Lagos be given a special status, but also Calabar, that were the first capital of this country. In fact, the problems we bear today are rising out of the colonial mentality that the country suffered as at the time we accommodated the country as the capital is something that will take a lot of time to sort out. So I support special status for these two cities. State police, I support state police, please. It is very, very clear that it will be difficult for a man who is coming from Bauchi to my own ward. It will be difficult for him. It will take him a lot of time, a long time, to look around and be able to know who are the criminals and who are upright citizens. But if we get a policeman who is right, and in fact, he knows who is committing what and who is not doing what. I believe that whether we like it or not, at some point in time, we'll have to face this stark reality. I support the ministerial status for Abuja. I oppose totally the autonomy that's supposed to be given to the Office of the Attorney General. I believe that the creation of 7 years totally be out of place. We should retain what is there right now. And then the Land Use Act should be abrogated completely. And then Section 9 about...
Put on your mic, please, Prince.
I'm rounding up. Section 9, I believe that we should have powers to come up with a new constitution if we are empowered with a referendum, like Senator Jodu has said. I think with that, that will resolve the issue of sovereign national conference and all these issues that have been coming about. With these few submissions, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I think I'll reserve the rest for the voting day. Thank you.
Senator Bassey Otu.
Mr. President, may I move that the Senate do take a bill for an act to facilitate the use of information in electronic form for conducting transactions in Nigeria and for connected purposes. 2013, second reading, I so move.
Go ahead.
This is one of the Vision 2020 bills that is being put forward by the Banking Committee to make sure that we build a very strong financial system and a banking one to give our economy a proper focus. I feel highly honored and privileged to lead the debate on the general principles of the bill for an act to facilitate the use of information in electronic form for conducting transactions in Nigeria vis-a-vis the Electronic Transaction Bill 2013. The bill was read the first time on Wednesday, 6 February 2013. Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, conceptually, electronic transaction is a term used in contemporary business communication literature to describe everything from a stock trade to the transfer of money. It involves the sales or purchases of goods or services, whether between businesses, households, individuals, government and other public or private organizations, conducted over computer-mediated networks by communicating digitized information from one person to another. The digitized information can be communicated and stored without the use of paper. The basic language of electronic transaction is fully and inherently paperless. Suffice it to add that the goods and services are ordered over this network, but the payment and the ultimate delivery of these goods or service may be conducted on or offline. In another parlance, it could mean a computer program or other electronic means used to initiate a functional business activity or to respond to electronic information records or activities in whole or in part without review by an individual at the time of the response or activity. Mr. President, distinguished senators, it can be argued that the gap between developed and developing countries is more and more determined by differences in the ability to engage in electronic transactions in almost all facets of human endeavor. The increasing dependence of economic activities on information, coupled with globalization of capital flow, trade, manufacturing, and other activities, have resulted in strong demand for better, more varied, and less costly communication and information services. Electronic transaction has greatly reduced the costing of transmitting and processing information changed the cost structure of many businesses and made possible new ways of meeting a wide range of information and communication needs. Electronic transactions has opened up a vast range of new forms and concepts of handling information. For example, with advanced electronic transaction and data system, financial markets have become integrated into worldwide round-the-clock operation. Other major services have likewise acquired global scale and the capability of virtually instantaneous response. Examples are found in air transportation, insurance, banking, postal trade, etc. Electronic has changed the way businesses and government offices are organized and staffed. For instance, large organizations are now able to decentralize operations worldwide while strengthening its central management. First, although the information sector already existed and experienced considerable growth in both developed and developing economies, well before the use of electronic become widespread. It is the development and convergence of computers through electronic digital technology that have propelled the information and economy into preeminence and global dimension. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, electronic transaction system must exhibit certain features and characteristics that will enhance its acceptability, credibility, validity, and reliability in our contemporary society. This includes 1, trustworthiness of the transaction, that is to say, parties to the transaction must have faith that records and documents used are genuine, authentic, and unaltered. The electronic signature must be authentic. For instance, the person signing is the same who has identified himself, depending on the type of signature used and the level of security inherent in that signature. It is possible that the electronic signature may be subject to greater risk of repudiation than handwritten signature. Data integrity, authenticity, accuracy, and completeness of information must be guaranteed, ensuring that no alteration has been made intentionally or accidentally. Documents and records must be retained for minimum long periods in such a manner that it could be admissible evidence in the court of law in case of a dispute. There must be a mechanism for the prohibition and punishment of all offenses relating to electronic misuse and fraud. Mr. President, distinguished senators, this bill seeks to accomplish the following objectives. 1, to facilitate the use of information in electronic form for conducting business transactions in Nigeria. To promote business and community confidence in electronic transactions between the individual, public, and the government alike. To encourage and approve the use of digital signature for electronic transactions in order to comply with banks for international settlement rules along international best practice. To provide legal assistance to the consumers on their rights and legal remedies to all those who may be shortchanged in electronic transactions. To eliminate legal barriers in the effective use of electronic communication in transactions, and at the same time promote the harmonization of legal rules on electronic transactions across the national boundaries. To enhance and maintain the integrity of information contained in all electronic transactions and promote accessibility of certain information electronically at any point and place without stress or rigor of going to the point of transaction to get such information. To provide for electronic communication of information or records in contract formation and operation in such a manner that the offer and acceptance of a contract could be done electronically in a manner that will express the offer, acceptance, or other matters. To encourage uniformity of a single information or a record provided in electronic form to a single addressee at the same time. To enable the government to use electronic means to create, store, transfer, distribute, publish, or otherwise deal with records or information. To allow authorized payments to be made to the government in electronic form in a manner specified by law and the authority. To provide for the prohibition and punishment of electronic crimes and fraud. The bill, when passed into law, would facilitate the use of all electronically generated information in the court of law for all civil transactions and validate the use of such information in contract and at the trial of cases in courts. The bill is made up of 46 clauses and rendered in 8 parts. Part 1 provides for the preliminary objectives and interpretation of the bill. Part 2 provides for the electronic records, such as application and scope of the bill, subsidiary regulation, validity of electronic records, documents required in writing, exclusion of provision by parties, original documents, admissibility of documents, exception to admissibility, electronic filing, electronic gazette, and retention of records. Part 3 has provision for electronic signature, such as validity of electronic signature, administration of electronic signature and certification authority, recognition of foreign certification authority, record retention by certification authority, and liability of certification authority. Part 4 contains clauses data protection, which includes scope of data protection provision, processing of personal data, processing of sensitive personal data, rights of data owner, rights of preventing data processing, liability of data holder, processing on behalf of data holder, security of personal data, and agents of data holder. 5 spells out conditions for electronic contracts, such as validity of electronic contracts, electronic payments, origin of documents, transmission of documents, dispatch of documents, and transnational transactions. Part 6 provides for consumer protection, such as information by vendor, cancellation of contract before processing, consumer personal information, and unsolicited messages. Part 7 contains provision for liability of service providers or vendors, which include liability of service providers, conditions for liability of service providers, temporary storage of records, passive storage of records, liability for links and processed records. Part 8 provides for legislations, which include the prohibitions and punishment for misuse and electronic fraud. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the presentation of this bill at a time like this, when our banking sector is presently undergoing reforms and the financial system globally is virtually embracing information technology. It is a well-conceived idea to put our dear country's financial system in line with the global standards and world best practices. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, according to a CBN report, the total value of electronic funds transferred in the country has risen to 80 billion daily. The report further pointed that in the first phase of the cashless policy, Nigerian interbank settlement system recorded over 20 billion daily transactions by value, while the Nigerian electronic funds transfer conducted about 60 billion transactions daily. With the next phase, which will include the FCT, Abia, Rivers, Anambra, Kano, and Ogun, electronic funds transfer will be on the increase due to expected changes, which will ipso facto necessitate the use of electronic funds transaction channels. Mr. President, distinguished senators, at this point in time, there is the dire need to regulate the spreading desire for electronic-based transaction in Nigeria through a well-conceived legislative framework. As a result, a bill like this is very timely, because as the English proverb says, a stitch in time saves 9. Generally, the importance and utility of this bill cannot be overemphasized, considering the part it will play not only in revolutionizing our transaction system, but also to the survival, growth and stability of our financial sector, and indeed the banking industry, which stands to gain immensely from the provisions of this bill. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, there is no financial compendium attached because the bill does not seek to establish any agency or commission that may require funding by government. Once more, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I implore you to give this bill an expeditious and speedy passage into law, as at the moment we don't have any legislative or legal framework that is taking care of this particular very important arm and transaction of our government economy. Thank you.